I'm Shannon Ireland, your host of a Healthy Push podcast. I struggled with anxiety, panic disorder, and agoraphobia for 15 years. Everything used to be hard for me. Even just driving 5 minutes from my house used to feel impossible. But now I absolutely live for travel and adventure, and I experience lots of peace and joy. I've not only reclaimed my life, but I've helped hundreds of others to do the same. Here, we stop managing anxiety and instead we create a healthy relationship with it. One where you say goodbye to the anxious thoughts, symptoms, panic attacks, and fears, and you actually live your life. Forget complicated strategies, quick fixes, or the same old hacks you've heard 100 times before. Each week, I'll bring you simple, actionable advice and honest conversations that lead to real, long-term healing. You aren't just an anxious person, my friend. There are reasons why you're struggling with anxiety, and these are things you can fix and heal from. And this is where that journey begins. Welcome. You're right where you're meant to be. Hello, and welcome back to a Healthy Push podcast. So today I have a guest with me, and we're going to talk about something that impacts a lot of people, not just athletes, even though that's primarily the work she does. It really impacts high achievers and perfectionists, and honestly, just a lot of people in anxiety recovery. So I have Shailyn Waites with me. She's a therapist and a retired athlete who now helps athletes and retired athletes and high achievers navigate these things like perfectionism and identity shifts and burnout. So we're going to dive into the perfectionism, shame, burnout cycle, the whole thing, and talk about how striving can quietly turn into self-criticism and shame, and how pushing ourselves too hard can actually backfire. So if you feel like, oh gosh, I know I have a bit of perfectionism tendencies, I know that I tend to want to do things perfectly, this conversation is going to be really good and helpful for you. So Shailyn, welcome to a Healthy Push podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk about all this today.
Yeah, this is going to be so good. So let's just start. Tell us about the work that you do, because it's so niche, but like we were just saying before we hit record, it's not really. Like a lot of people are impacted by all of the stuff that you teach about.
100%. Yes. So yeah, how I kind of got started in this field was as you mentioned in the intro, I was a former athlete myself. And so kind of going through the sports world in particular, really showed me the lack of support that we have with some of these things, as well as when you leave sport, it's kind of okay, you're done, good luck, and not really getting the support that you need. So that's kind of why I niched into that area. But you are so right with just this applying to everybody. I see clients who also aren't athletes and retired athletes and just have a background in other areas where they might have a trauma history, or they are struggling with generalized anxiety or eating disorders, or all of these things that also this cycle shows up with. So I think it is very much applicable to everybody. We live in a society that is very hustle culture based. So it is something that we all embrace. But I specialize working with certain niches, I guess.
Yeah, I say something that applies to so many people, right? Is like this, our culture and the go, 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 do, like hustle. And then when you're trying to heal from something, like literally anything, you can put that same amount of pressure on yourself. And it makes things so freaking hard. Okay,
Yes.
I'm curious, just on a human aspect, like what sport did you do?
I was for women's hockey.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool. That's
Yeah.
crazy. So I actually had a professional soccer player on, and she told her story, which of course, when I came across you, I thought of her because she had similar feelings of like, you're sort of, even when you're in it and you're playing, you don't even really get that like mental health support that you need. So I think it's such a gap. So I'm so glad that this is the work that you do.
It
It's so cool.
is. Or even if it is offered, I think the mental health stigma is so prevalent in that community of you need to be strong, or you need to be seen a specific way, and that might make you look weak, or whatever it may be, that the support may even be there, but the
Mm.
opportunity to go and take advantage of it is hard to step out of that zone and challenge those stigmas, which can be so difficult.
Yeah, so true. I'm even thinking like when I worked in healthcare, like a normal, quote normal, right?
Yeah.
9 to 5 corporate job. And they offered like some therapy services at discounted rates or like different sort of programs. But I think there's such a stigma across the board that people are often not inclined to use those resources that are offered. So
Yeah.
you're so right. It's like there are oftentimes something there, but like we don't utilize it. Okay,
100%.
let's talk about what is this cycle that you talk so much about for the perfectionism shame burnout cycle, because I can so relate to it, but I think once you explain it, people are gonna be like, oh dang, like that
Yeah.
I think I've been in this.
Yes, yes. So I often explain it. I'm a very visual person. So usually how I explain it is I want you to think of like a big circle where you've got like perfectionism, you've got shame, and you've got burnout in this circle. But then there's almost like a smaller circle in that circle that link perfectionism and shame together.
Mm,
And so when we look at this, we've got this big circle, and usually it starts with perfectionism. So whether it's a conscious or an unconscious thing that's happening, oftentimes where perfectionism stems from, and I think most people think that perfectionism is just, oh, I just like want to do things perfectly and like be productive. And we're often seeing it as like a positive thing.
mhm,
Whereas perfectionism is not just about doing things perfectly or acting perfectly. It's very much about the fear of failure. It's about your identity being tied to, or your self-worth being tied to what you're doing. And it's also this need for external validation from other people. So you're putting a lot of emphasis on what others are going to give to you
mm,
and the perception of others. So it's very much like driving your behaviors and the things that you do based off of what are they going to think of me, which then you can imagine isn't allowing you to be authentic to yourself, because if you're operating from what are they going to think of me and then shaping your behaviors or actions around that, then you're kind of drifting away from who you truly are.
mm,
So perfectionism starts this cycle. And what happens is it has these expectations that are often very unrealistic because they expect you to be perfect, which we are human. We cannot be perfect. So ultimately, what happens is you will fall short in this cycle because you're human, not because there's something wrong with you.
mm.
And what happens in that moment is we kind of go to this side of that circle and shame shows up. So I like to describe them as like almost like perfectionism is driving the car and shame is like the backseat driver that's like very
Oh,
annoying, being like,
yep.
oh, you should do this right now, or oh, you didn't make this turn, and is like that annoying voice. And when shame shows up, shame attacks who you are as a person. So this is where a lot of people don't often know the difference between shame and guilt because we aren't taught these things in society. Shame being more an attack on your identity, whereas guilt is an attack on something you've done. So guilt would be like, I did something bad, whereas shame is like, I am bad,
Mm,
or I am not good enough, or I'm not capable, I'm not deserving. It's an attack on who you are as a person, not what you've done. So you've got perfectionism setting you up ultimately to fail, even though the purpose is to try to save you from failure. And then you face shame, and then shame feels awful to feel. So you want to get out of shame because that's awful. And the way out is to go back to perfectionism. Well, if I just get my life together and I get my control back, then I'm going to be okay. So you can imagine this goes back and forth because you get your control back, you think you're doing okay, and then you're going to fall short at some point, and then you face shame again. And every time this happens, this loop, your capacity starts to shrink and shrink and shrink and shrink to a point where eventually the loop no longer goes back to perfectionism and it goes down to burnout. So that's that emotional, mental, physical exhaustion that happens. And you stay in that area for quite some time. And then your way out of burnout is I just have to pull myself together. I have to get my life back in order. and then you're back to perfectionism and the cycle continues. So that's why oftentimes people are like, I just need to go on a vacation, or I need to like have a long weekend and I'll be rested and recovered. And that's not possible to heal burnout because you're going back to the same cycle that's going to cause the burnout again when you get back from your vacation or your long
Yeah.
weekend.
Yeah, I wish those things actually like
Yes.
solved these bigger problems, right? But they're like so many underlying patterns that have gotten reinforced by your actions and behaviors. And that's what makes things so sticky. Because it's like, yeah, I just went on this week-long vacation and I maybe felt great. But as soon as I get back, I am like back in that same mental space. And when you said capacity, that really hit me because it like, I think that's a huge part of what this cycle does, right? Is it chips away at your capacity. And I think people are often left, especially perfectionists, right? Feeling like I'm doing so much, like I'm doing everything, I'm trying so hard. And why am I still struggling? And I think a lot of it's because of this capacity, right? Like it really does eat away at your capacity to be able to even function. So, like, can you talk a little bit about that? Because I don't think we ever really realize, like, oh, this is like chipping away at my capacity and maybe leading to burnout. I think that oftentimes with most people, I don't know, you can tell us, but like most people, when they hit burnout, it is like, oh shit, this kind of came out of nowhere and feels like my whole world is crumbling. But it's like, it's been a slow burn.
Yeah. I think that's a great point that you just brought up, is like most people feel like it came out of nowhere, right? Whereas the process, and that's why I kind of mentioned at the beginning, like the process is somewhat unconscious. Like people are just doing it and they're not even aware that their expectation was set at the beginning of their day of what their day should look like. And then by the end of the day, they're shaming themselves for not getting enough done, or that they weren't enough that day, or that they were lazy, or whatever shame is saying to them. And that can all be happening unconsciously. And it just keeps building and building and building, where your body can only hold so much. So that's why burnout is not a problem solving solution. It's a nervous system solution, right? Because your nervous system can only hold on to so much before it goes, we can't keep doing this. This isn't sustainable. So it either forces you to be sick. So oftentimes people will be like, oh my gosh, I'm like continuously sick. And they face it that way, or all of a sudden they're like procrastinating a lot. They're not being productive. Maybe they're finding less joy in their everyday things that do bring them joy. Like if they have like certain things in their routine, like movement or something that brings them joy, they're no longer like engaging in that. And you start just disconnecting from not just your life in general, but also who you are and what brings you joy because of the burnout cycle.
Yeah. Oh, it's so hard because, like I said, I think when you're in it, you don't really recognize it. But when you say, like, it can cause you to sort of be sick and like lose joy and like lose motivation to even want to do things, which, of course, I think when you're a perfectionist, that can be really jolting and scary because you're not used to operating from a place of low capacity. And you're like, this feels really awful, really uncomfortable. Like, when you say it can cause you to be sick, like, what can that look like? What do you often see burnout looking like for people?
Yeah. So often what I see is like genuine sickness, like where they're in bed with the
Mm-hmm.
flu or whatever that may be, because their immune system has dropped so much, because the capacity has dropped, right? So it can look like that. It can also, I mean, recent research is even looking at how holding on to our emotions and not processing and moving through them, which then contributes to burnout because your body can't hold on to everything, is even being linked to like autoimmune disorders and things like that. So even more serious situations long term.
Yeah, I think what you just said is something I definitely want to talk about because I think the not processing emotions is some like a big part of human experience, right? For a lot of us, like we either were never given the space to process them, we weren't really taught how to process them, like traumatic things happened, right? Like there's so many different things that can be in the mix. But I think when you struggle with perfectionism, you have that tendency, right, to not even slow down enough to let yourself feel. So
No.
when you're constantly going and doing, it's like, oh, this is great. But then you start to have signs of like, oh, my body is saying we need to slow down. And I'm all of a sudden, right, feeling sick or experiencing a lot of anxiety. So like, can you talk about that? Because I think the not processing emotions must be a really common thing that you see.
Yes. Yeah. So perfectionism is a form of a defense mechanism against emotions, right?
Mm-hmm.
So oftentimes people in this cycle will see emotional processing or dealing with difficult emotions as like not productive, right? I can't
Mm-hmm.
sit here and cry. I have things I have to do. Or like if I try to confront my emotions, that's terrifying because I don't do that.
Yeah.
So I need control. Emotions aren't controllable. They're manageable, but they're
Mm-hmm.
not able to be controlled, right? So that scares the perfectionism side of things of, oh my goodness, we've lost control. So perfectionism comes in as a defense against emotions, which that's why the cycle has to be worked with as a whole, because you can't. So oftentimes what I see in sessions with clients in particular is they want to approach the perfectionism side of things because this side seems scary, right? So like,
Yeah.
let's just work on perfectionism. We don't need to work on shame, right? But perfectionism is, I want you to imagine that perfectionism is like if you're in like a war battle, perfectionism is like the person standing in front of you with a shield. And if we are just to confront perfectionism, essentially we're removing the person with the shield. And now you're standing there going, I have no protection. This is terrifying. And you're not gonna, your nervous system isn't going to be able to go there. It's going to ignite all defenses possible, avoidance, dissociation, like all these things are going to come into the picture because that's terrifying,
Mm-hmm.
right? So when we look at this, we have to work with the whole cycle because the only way through it is if you focus on being okay with processing shame in the present or in the past that things have happened for you, and not fearing shame is going to allow the protector to quiet down.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I think so many people, though, don't recognize shame as being even part of the mix. And I think, of course, not recognizing it as being a driver of the cycle, like continuing. So, what are some ways? It's so hard, I think, because when you're struggling with perfectionism, you're often like in your head telling yourself a lot of stories. Like there are a lot of reasons, right, why you have certain actions and behaviors. A lot of it is that control, like you were talking about. So you're like, if I keep controlling things and I keep like making sure I'm good, right? But like, where can we recognize that shame is part of the mix? Because that I think is one of the most common experiences in my work with students is like shame is very much present. And that's a big thing. Like, you can't ignore that.
Yes. Yeah. So honestly, typically how I would start with this cycle is, and the hard part of this cycle is sometimes it is hard to do on your own
Mm-hmm.
because it is such an unconscious pattern that it's kind of like a habit, right? Like people are
Mm-hmm.
engaging in a habit and they don't even like know that they're doing it until someone else might be like, hey, like, do you notice what you're doing right now? So sometimes it's really hard to work on this cycle by yourself. Also, this cycle embraces isolation. So that is also really hard. So typically, when I work on this, it's not just about focusing on shame off the jump. It's about becoming like okay with emotions in general.
Mm-hmm.
So okay, like if more, I don't really like to use the word like negative and positive emotions, but if more like,
The unwanted ones.
yeah, like the more like wanted emotions of like happiness, excitement, like if that feels safer for you to start to identify with, starting there of just like, okay, like how do I notice what emotion is showing up for me? Like, how do I know it's that emotion? Like what's happening in my body when I'm feeling that emotion? And then expanding to other things like sadness or anger or hurt, and working your way to shame can be helpful, because shame is one that is so incredibly hard to sit with, because it feels like it's not something that can be solved, which is hard for perfectionism. Not that any emotion can be solved, but shame is attacking you as a person, as opposed to most other emotions is more like, I'm sad about a situation that's happening, or I'm angry because someone lied to me or crossed a value of mine. So there's like a situation based with it. Whereas shame is very much like, I'm not good enough, I'm not capable, I'm not deserving. And that feels hard to sit with. So it's kind of working with all emotions to start, and then working your way to shame, and understanding, and this is where like therapy probably comes into the picture, of understanding the roots of where your shame exists, right? So oftentimes I'll say to people like, I am not good enough feels like deeply rooted for you, because there's been 5 examples that you've given me just in your sessions currently that have showed that those experiences validated that belief. Like maybe you didn't make a team that you wanted, so you weren't good enough. Or maybe you got kicked out of a friend group that they no longer wanted you to be a part of. In that moment, it felt like it confirmed I wasn't good enough, right? So these are human experiences that have kind of collected, and now they're following you with, okay, let's just add to the I'm not good enough, everything that happens, right? And so the roots also have to be addressed, which can be hard until you work your way to being able to sit with shame.
Yeah, I love that you said that, because I think shame is such a big and tricky one, and starting there is probably not the best place. And it is a lot, it's a lot to unpack, because I think, like you are saying, there are deep rooted, maybe like experiences and stories and beliefs, and that stuff like doesn't just go away.
Yeah.
But I love how you've said a couple of times, right? Like emotions aren't controllable. They're not solvable. Like, and I think
Yeah.
that's such a big part of this. Like we try so hard to control and like solve for our emotions, which just leads to so much more of those unwanted, quote, unwanted emotions. I'm assuming you see oftentimes with athletes, retired athletes, like anxiety maybe is the reason why somebody then seeks support and is able to recognize this. Can
Yeah.
you maybe talk about that?
Yes. So most of the time in intakes, I will see like, I'm just a really anxious person, or
Mm,
I'm struggling with my anxiety, which totally could be fair, right? Like it's not that every single time you feel anxious you might be in this cycle. But oftentimes what I do see when working with that particular population is the anxiety is almost a secondary emotion to what's happening. But
mm,
it feels, even though anxiety is very hard to sit with, it feels safer to sit with than shame,
mm,
right? So in this moment, it's, I'm anxious because if I fail right now, I'm going to have to face shame.
mm,
I'm anxious because what if I don't say everything correctly and I'm perceived a specific way, then I'm going to face shame, or
mm.
they're going to think something different of me.
Yeah.
Right? So the anxiety is showing up because of the cycle, but the cycle is remaining unconscious. So
Mm,
oftentimes, what I do see all the time actually is clients will come to sessions and be like, I've sought therapy previously, like we've worked on grounding techniques, like all the lovely things for anxiety. Nothing's improving. And what is happening is because it doesn't matter in those moments if you're grounding yourself or doing all the techniques that were given to you, if you're just constantly going back to the cycle, it's going to
yeah.
keep showing up.
That makes so much sense. It's so hard because I think you're just trying so hard in the moment, right? To like make yourself feel better. But
100%.
Yeah, and it's so human, right? To try and want to do anything to make yourself feel better. But it is, I say, anxiety is like that kind of protector emotion that comes in is like, okay, there's something going on here. Like, we need your attention. And it's often not like, I need more breathing techniques or I need, it's like there's some deeper stuff here that we've got to look at. Do you ever have people come to you that it's like kind of more, I don't want to say like crisis, but more of I'm having like panic attacks, like intense fear, like there is a lot of anxiety going on here?
Yes. Yes, I do. And it honestly, it comes back to stemming from why they're coming to therapy. Like I was saying at the beginning, and how we were saying how this it like really applies to everybody, right? So oftentimes this cycle for athletes or retired athletes stems from like a performance-based aspect of like, well, if I perform a specific way, I get praise or I get external validation, which then confirms I'm enough. Or if I don't, then I'm not enough, that types of things. But people that come with like more of a trauma background, their perfectionism probably stems from a place of safety, right?
Mhm.
So of if I was perfect in my home, it wouldn't create chaos, right? If
Mhm.
I did everything perfectly, I wouldn't get yelled at. Or if I did things a specific way, that's the moment I would receive love,
Mhm.
right? So it also comes down to like why they came to therapy in the first place, like where the roots are and what does it stem from? Like what are you looking to get out of this cycle, essentially?
Yeah. That makes sense. I think I'm thinking, right, my brain's going to this place because I work with so many people who are struggling with the, real intense panic disorder, agoraphobia, like a lot of
Mm.
anxiety, a lot of fear there. And something I often see, and I assume this is stuff you see daily, especially with athletes, retired athletes, is there's been so much achieving, so much doing, so much performing, and I think this is true for so many people that I work with, that like they're so used to going and doing and not ever really slowing down. And then kind of either like being forced to be in that place of slow down, like their body has started to really react and like throw them all these symptoms and like they really have to slow down, or they're like, you know maybe a life shift, right? And like for you and the work that you do, I imagine retired athletes, right, going from doing and performing to like now there's a lot of quietness, slow down. What do I do with this? And I think that can be so jolting for people, right? Of like, I'm in this space where things are quiet, and why the heck now is all the chaos coming up? Like, can you talk about that?
Yeah.
Because I think often people
Mhm.
are so blindsided by like, why is there so much anxiety now? But it's like it kind of makes sense.
It does make sense. It this cycle is very much like it can be not that it is beneficial, but it is almost like rewarded in childhood and teenage years because you have coaches, teachers, parents who, or like caregivers in particular, that are praising you or giving you the external validation. They're also hopefully meeting your basic needs, right? So they're like doing all the extra stressors that come with adulthood of like feeding you, making sure you have like the things that you need, right? Letting you get to sleep on time, whatever it may be. Once it hits adulthood, all of a sudden this coping skill that could have been sport or whatever was present in your life. For some people, that could even look like school, right?
Mhm.
Of like, I felt competent because of my grades, or
Mhm.
I felt good enough because of my grades. And now I'm no longer in school, I'm entering the workforce or whatever. In those moments, it's you no longer have teachers who are praising you, especially if you're in university and you're in a class of 300 people. You no longer have coaches who are praising you, even if you are still in sport. Once you get to that level, coaches are more so giving you constructive criticism as opposed to like praise.
Mhm.
And you no longer have parents that are praising you in some regards, like you're not potentially living with them or seeing them all the time. So you're kind of on your own. And all of a sudden, I'm not getting any external validation. So my perfectionism isn't being accepted or isn't being validated. So now I'm facing shame all of the time. And I have time to sit with shame. And that's scary. So how do I stay busy? Right? How do I work an insane amount of hours? Or how do I get into other things that are just going to keep my mind busy? And that's where people start to see it show up, because it starts to unravel.
Yeah. And I think too, I don't know, I'm sure you see this in the work that you do. And I think we've talked about it a little bit, is this like desire to sort of apply this to getting better. Like if I just do X, Y, Z, like tell me what to do, I'll do it all. And I'm sure you
Yes.
have people come to therapy, right? And sit down with you and they're like, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And it's so hard because it's not like a checkbox type thing that you can just do and perform and like voila, you're better and the shame disappears and like the cycle goes away.
Yes. It is such a common thing that I see. I like so many times I have to be like, you are doing the work. This is you
Yeah.
doing the work, right? Giving them the validation of you just coming to your session right now and sitting with this feeling and trying to talk through it or trying to process it with me is you doing the work.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that there's going to be a fancy skill that's going to get rid of this cycle for you, right? It's about awareness building and being able to then, once you build that awareness and be able to implement skills of sitting with emotions, processing your emotions, working through them, releasing them, that comes with time. And you will still see, I think, a big point we've discussed before the podcast is like wanting there to almost be like progress all the time in therapy, as well, then I'm improving.
Yeah.
Right. So I think a big part of that also is not just validating them and what's showing up, but also setting an expectation of what healing even looks like, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of there's going to be progress at times. There's going to be times where you're like, oh, the cycle's back. That doesn't mean you failed. Actually, it's a huge indicator that you're progressing because you were able to be aware that it was coming back. So you're catching it way faster than you would have. And you have the tools and the awareness now to be able to pull yourself out of it, as opposed to letting it get to a place of burnout. Right? So it comes with a lot of factors, with clients in particular, of just setting the expectations, validating them and their work and what they're doing in sessions. Sometimes I find it helpful too with people with this like kind of intellectualizing mindset to describe like, okay, so right now we're like pulling ourselves to the intellectualizing defense, because maybe talking about shame feels really scary right now. So it's okay, how am I going to, like, what's a skill that's going to help me through this in this moment? Whereas right now we need to try to sit with it if
Mm-hmm.
possible, right?
It's
Expand the capacity with it.
Yeah, yeah. It's so beautiful that you're saying this because it's so funny. Me and my mom were just having a conversation the other day, and she was like saying how it's so frustrating that at times in therapy, like her therapist will just look at her and be like, "And how does that feel in your body?" And she's like, "If he asks me that one more time," I'm like, but mom, you understand why, right? Because I mean, I got a lot of course, of these like patterns from her, but like when you're somebody who does intellectualize and you're often in your head and you think you can like outthink your emotions, it's so helpful to be like, okay, let's not keep going there. Like, let's actually let yourself feel what's happening. And having someone to call you out on that is so incredibly helpful. I know, like, my therapist, I tell her all the time, I'm like, no, 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 you need to call me out because I am that person who will just want to like outthink it, or like, oh, what's that book that you said? I'll go get that book. I'll read the whole thing in like 2 days. Like
Yes.
it's so hard to get out of those patterns that you're so used to being in.
It is so hard. And I think this is where the human aspect comes in of like being a former athlete myself. And also I will openly share with clients, like, this is a cycle that I also engage in and have struggled with. And it's not to say that this now is completely out of my life. There's definitely times where I notice like, ooh, I see perfectionism showing up today, or as like my capacity is low that day or whatever it may be, I see the trends come up. And it's not about that this is never going to happen to you again. Your defenses have served you in your life. At some point, they have served you, right? Whether it be perfectionism, like we talked about with trauma, to create safety for yourself, or maybe avoidance was your way of creating safety for yourself, or to push through certain situations that you had to push through. So it's not that these things need to disappear from your life. They have served you at some point in your life. They just no longer are serving you. So it makes sense that in moments of vulnerability or moments that feel really hard, these defenses are going to trickle back in because they think that you need saving.
Yeah.
And in that moment, it's more about acknowledging that they're showing up. I know how to move through these. I know how to connect back to myself. Then it is, oh, they showed up again, I'm failing.
Yeah. Let's talk about that, because I think it's so easy to go to that place, right? Of like, I suck, like that self-punishment, I'm going backwards, like this is happening again. And you kind of easily convince yourself, like kind of what you were saying before, if this is just who I am sort of thing. But it's like, no. So I would love to hear you like tell us, what do you think are some ways that you can like go toward that growth, that healing, without going into the self-punishment mode? Because I think that is so subconscious too. Like you don't even really recognize that you're being an asshole to yourself. And it makes things so hard.
So when you're noticing like the self-criticism show up, I think that's where being mindful and aware of how you're speaking to yourself. So that's the biggest piece, is starting with the awareness, right? Because a lot of this is unconscious. A lot of this, like you said, we don't even notice that we're like doing these things, and then it's affecting how we're feeling because we are doing them unconsciously. So being able to be mindful of that internal voice. What is it saying to me? Why is it showing up to protect me in this moment? Right? Instead of it showing up, there's something wrong with me, I need to do better, I need to figure this out, I need to gain control, being more so curious with it. Okay, what it's showing up right now, that's interesting. Like, I wonder what it's trying to protect me from right now. Is it trying to protect me from an overwhelming to-do list that I feel like I'm going to fail at today? And so it's already starting the procrastination process. And now I'm shaming myself for being lazy or not starting fast enough, or now I'm behind and all these things. Why is it showing up to protect me right now? And how do you bring that back to the present moment then? What do I need in this moment? Right? How can I, if that's the example we're going with, maybe what you need in that moment is to adjust your to-do list to what your capacity is that day. Or maybe it's, I need to go release some of my emotions in some way. Maybe I need to sit with them for a little bit. Maybe I need to move them through my body, engage in some form of movement, like whatever that may be. But taking it out of, I'm going to just punish myself and shame myself and then still expect myself to do this thing, and more so towards curiosity. Why is this showing up right now? What is it trying to protect me from? How am I feeling? How can I move through this feeling? Is the other side of it, which all comes from, you have to be able to be aware of that you're doing it in the first place.
Yeah. Which I know, and I can so attest to, right? That awareness feels like it's not really a step. It's not like significant enough. It's not like, I don't know, sexy, shiny, but like you can't do any of the other work without that awareness piece. So I love how you keep mentioning like that's so important. And just this, like, it really is a lot of simple, basic things that we've got to come back to. Like, what do I need, right? How can I support myself in this moment? Once you've sort of been curious, right, and had that awareness there, but like just asking yourself, what do I need right now? I know for myself, that's like massive. I used to sit down, I'm sure you'll be able to relate to this, and like people listening. I used to sit down with like, I love check boxes, of course, and like checking things off the list. And I would start my day with like 15 things on the list. And it's like every day felt so overwhelming. Like, talk about procrastinating and like just then feeling like I don't have that energy for any of this. I don't want to do any of it. And like having to come to this place of, okay, let's put 3 or 4 things on the list. And then if we can add more, great. But like, there's not that overwhelming sense of, oh my God, I have so much stuff to do. So I think there are a lot of simple shifts that you can make, and not saying it's easy. It's
100%.
not easy. Like, it feels
No,
uncomfortable. Yeah. It's so
I think
uncomfortable.
one that came up for me when you were just talking about that is one that I often work with clients as like a starter skill that they could work on is working with that to-do list, right? So a lot of people make their to-do list on like a Sunday. They're preparing for their whole week. They're figuring it all out. What are the days going to look like? What do I need to accomplish each day? Which can be very problematic because on a Sunday, if you're working or in school and you have the typical Monday to Friday schedule, on a Sunday, you're probably feeling pretty good, right? You just had like multiple days of rest. You got to like do things that you love to do each day. You didn't have to go to work or school or whatever it may be. So you're probably feeling pretty good. So how you're framing your week is coming from a place of pretty high capacity. Whereas you don't know what Thursday is going to look like. Was your capacity going to look like at Thursday, but it was made for you from a high capacity on Sunday, and now you're going to fail at it? Which is so fair because your capacity will change each day, right? Maybe a stressor has happened that you weren't prepared for. And what happens for clients is, oh my goodness, I'm already behind on Monday now. All of that has to shift to Tuesday. So now I have to do Tuesdays plus what I didn't do on Monday. So the whole week is coming from a place of shame because you're already behind. Now you're trying to catch up. You're not being able to catch up. So now you failed the week. So even working, like you said, like working with a to-do list can be beneficial. That is working with your perfectionism side of things, but it can be a way to start because that is a very mindful thing. You are creating a to-do list, so you can adjust it.
Yeah. I love that. So much of what you shared, I'm just like, oh my gosh, it's so helpful. Just like allowing yourself to recognize that shame is a huge driver of this. And I don't think shame gets talked about enough. And it's so often like goes hand in hand with the perfectionism and also anxiety. And like, it's such a powerful thing to recognize and then like really work on that. But like you said, it's probably not starting there. So if people want to like do some more work, if they want to like find you, maybe work with you, connect with you, where can they find you?
Yeah. So my license allows me to work one-to-one with clients in British Columbia, Canada, or Ontario, Canada. However, I have been working on like other things that I could release for people worldwide, particularly around perfectionism, shame, and burnout, because I have so many people from all over the world who reach out to me and are like, wait, I need you to help me with this cycle. And unfortunately, I cannot provide one-to-one service with them. So I've been wanting to release some courses and things like that. So if people want to find me, they can, probably the best place to find me would just be on Instagram at the Soulless Flow, and or my website, www.thesoullessflow.com.
I love that. Shailyn, this has been such a good, helpful conversation, and I really appreciate you coming on.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It was so awesome to talk about all this today.
I hope you loved this episode of A Healthy Push. If you have, I'd be so grateful if you could leave me a rating and review wherever you're listening to this podcast. This helps people to find the show and get the support they need. And if you know someone who could use a little push, be sure to share this episode with them. And for even more support, head over to ahealthypush.com for show notes and loads of tips, tools, and inspiration to help you on your recovery journey. I'll see you next week.